being chased, thrown on the run, and it is caught. Touchdown, Keenan Allen. What a grab.
That's what I'm talking about. Hey, that's what I'm talking about. That's the warrior spirit right there, boy.
Huge sack by Joey Bosa.
90-yard touchdown. 90-yard touchdown.
It's going to be picked off at the 8-yard line by Derwin James.
Herbert sets his feet, takes a shot downfield, has Guyton. Caught! Touchdown Chargers!
That's the greatest throw I've ever seen.
What is going on, BoltFam? Andy, your host here. Welcome to the Thunder Down Under Chargers podcast, joined regularly by Jack. Hello, mate.
Fuck!
And explicit warning on this one. And a warm welcome back in the studio to Alister. Good to have you back, mate. Probation pending.
Oh, it's great to be back with you, Jack and Andy, and arrived from San Francisco, and I'm thinking I might fly right back and hop on a boat over to Alcatraz and maybe spend the rest of the off-season there and come back 2023.
Yeah. You changed many different accents in that one, so well done. You really got probably all the spread of where you went. It's good to have you back.
A little in-joke for the listeners too. Of course, Jack back in the day lived in England for a couple of years, and within 3 to 6 months there had developed a strong Cockney accent. So sometimes to fit in, you pick up the accent. And I had a great time over there with all the Yankees. So thanks for the people over there who made recommendations, and those who caught up with me had an absolute blast.
Yeah, nice one. Good for everyone putting up with you, so we didn't have to for a little while. Well, fellas, that one bloody fucking sucked, mate. There's no two ways about it. Heart ripped out via the intestines sort of areas. Jack, I know you were watching live as I was. We were texting violently throughout. Al, we haven't heard your sweet voice in so long, so not without the accompaniment of windy nature or 70,000 some screaming football fans in the background. Paint us a bit of a picture as to your little journey in consuming.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick version. I watched the first half of the game at an airport bar in Seattle. At halftime, I essentially declared the game over to Jack and Andy. I said, relax, guys, just enjoy it. It's not possible to give up a lead like this. And then I jumped on the plane to San Francisco.
Hold on, Alister. You've missed out the point where I've actually said, Alister, your hubris is going to cost us. You missed out that point there, and you've actually made fun of me for saying the third quarter is going to be really important here. Going, what are you worrying about, Jack? Don't worry about it. Game was over 45 minutes ago. Thought I'd put that in there, mate.
I did say the quick version. But I've omitted some relevant details in my own favour, unsurprisingly. And then when I arrived in San Francisco, checked into our international gate, I sat there and I saw on the airport bus, it flicked us, showing highlights of Doug Peterson, arms aloft, and my wife, whose back was to the screen, said, "What's happened?" I don't know what I did. I know how I felt. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt like a panic attack, and I clearly had turned pale or something. She just said, "What happened?" I said, "Chargers lost." And then I probably didn't speak more than 2 words on the entire 16-hour flight back home to Australia. So I dealt with it well, all things considered. But I'm almost happy that's how it happened for me, because I can't imagine actually watching that live. If there was ever a game I was happy to miss and just be told at the end that's what happened, this was it. So in a sense, I don't envy either of you two or the TDU crew out there who watched it.
It was, for me, it was the worst professional sports loss I've ever been a part of. I'm lucky, Andy, I go for Essendon. I've seen a premiership. Alister, you've seen a premiership as well. You haven't seen a premiership, Andy, with the Saints. But this one has taken me a long time to recover. It's taken me about 3 days, I think, to be fully compos mentis. And even though I screamed at the start of this podcast, I've calmer heads prevail, and I was sort of feeling a little better, but that was hard. That was very, very, very hard. Very hard.
Yeah, I've seen a few AFL Grand Final losses for my team. Some as a young kid that scarred me for life, and some when I was inebriated and upset and angry afterwards. But this was by far the most gut-wrenching. I watched it with a couple of mates who don't follow the Chargers, just enjoy the sport, hanging out, and I couldn't get out of that house faster. Partner came to pick me up, and she was a little late, and it made for awkward lounge room time where I couldn't just stand outside and wait. Just had to have a bad time engulfing that. Well, on that, we'll do our best to get through all the important stuff from the wildcard loss in Jacksonville. Have a bit of fun with what we think might be to come this off season, and let you guys know what we have in store now that the season itself is finished up, just for our little future. All right, deep breath. You can do this. Los Angeles Chargers 30, Jacksonville Jaguars 31.
Fuck!
That start, it was glorious. It wasn't clean necessarily, but it was beautiful. 4 first half interceptions by the defense. Asante Samuel Jr. shaking off the cinder blocks and hauling them in. Offense took advantage of short field positions. Chargers are 27 points up. If we were living in dreamland, this surely would have culminated in a new set of sheets come morning time. Alas, the sheets still needeth be changed, because what happened next was a nightmare so sinister and bewildering, urine had soaked right through to the mattress. I'll rip the Band-Aid. Jags pegged it back 30-26. Trevor Lawrence was playing out of his mind in the second half. Chargers not so much. Joey, poor Joey. Spat the dummy, thrust his helmet through to the earth's core. That 2-point conversion meant the ensuing Riley Patterson field goal would win it as the clock ran down. And there, the Chargers season ended. Jack, I want to ask you, what stats are important in a game like this?
The score.
What matters?
The score.
Other than the score.
fact it's win or loss. That's what matters there. It's playoff football. However you get the win that's how you win.
Well, that's a result.
Playoff games. Yeah.
What
stats matter? I mean, ASJ had a record-breaking game, and I think that's a really good step in his career. I think that's great for his confidence and things like that at a very personal sort of micro level. Other than that, Everett had a good game, but we tended to just not pass to him in the second half. What stats matter for me? It's the win or the loss. That's it. That's the long and the short, and that's all I have. So. Yeah, good question, but I'm a bit... Alister's got his hand up in it. The numbers guy. Here we go.
Can I talk about some stats?
Come on, numbers guy.
The best stats from this game has to be Trevor Lawrence is 5 of 15 for 35 yards in the first half, a TD and 4 interceptions. And in the second half, he's 10 of 11, 115 yards, 3 touchdowns on passes outside the numbers. And it's just the tale of two halves. And it was so upsetting to see adjustments made on the Jags side of the ball. And they were made. I went through the coach's film. What was clear is in the first half, there was kind of passing over the middle, which we were covering really well. And second half afterwards, and in fact, they started doing it on the final drive of the first half. And this is what bothers me about our defensive coaches. They started utilising swings, screens, outbreaking routes, and they decided they were going to put stress on Tranquil, on Kenneth Murray, on Derwin James, and they were going to use a lot more quick game and not worry about hitting some of their receivers so far down the field. And we didn't counter adjust, or we don't have players who are really good at doing some of those things. I think it's a combination of both, and it was really depressing to see that. None of the three of us are X's and O's experts, but it was palpable that one side had made some good changes and the other side hadn't so much. That's one big takeaway numerically for me, and then what I was seeing on the film. What did you think, Andy?
Oh, just on that, I really noticed that early Kenneth Murray was actually looking pretty dangerous around the line of scrimmage. Recorded that sack, got another hurry, and he picked the gap really well. And
it was like his first sack of the year when he didn't get stuck on the line. That was such a good blitz. He worked through two blockers.
Awesome, and he was patient as well on it as well, timed it well. And then yeah, like you said, it started just before the half. That's sort of where I started to get a bit jittery when I saw that last drive. It was reminiscent of Week 18, Denver getting that late one back, and even though it was a bit different how it went down, it was the same sort of feel. And then I see a lot more of Kenneth Murray as the kind of the backer dropping into coverage, and he was just concrete feet, didn't know where to be, and was getting picked off over the middle every single time. Christian Kirk, you name it. Evan Ingram
killed us.
Same
There was
kind of
missed
concept.
tackles started to creep in, which weren't there in the first half. Tranquil, went for an ankle tackle and he got through for about 30.
One of the hardest things to do when you're performing an activity or you're running an organisation is to make changes on the go. And I think what we saw with Peterson versus Staley is we saw an experienced coach be able to work through hardship. He's clearly experienced it before at Philadelphia with Wentz going down and then having to have Foles come in. But actually knowing what to do, knowing what to say, how to communicate. Because you clearly saw, for me, in some of that film that you shared, Alister, the eyes for Lawrence completely changed. He wasn't looking intermediate. He started actually looking deep. They gave him a little bit more time as well at the offensive line with all that movement at the line of scrimmage from the swings and screen passes.
Is he a good quarterback, Jack?
Before I go on that one, what I'm saying here is that Brandon Staley and Joe Lombardi can clearly plan for a game. I don't think there's any doubting that they can play. They can install a game plan. The players know exactly what they need to do, and they were sitting down on everything short. ASJ was just sitting down. Derwin James continued to sit down into that second half, and you saw it biting on those intermediate passes. So there's a breakdown somewhere at what happens at halftime. Either the players don't get the right communication, the coaches don't make the right adjustments, or they do, the players are just not empowered to, or they can't actually go out there and do it. But something happens at halftime, and I don't know what that is. I do trust Brandon Staley to make those adjustments, but I think when we talk about out-coaching, what the fuck does that mean? But it clearly was one guy that was able to make adjustments on the fly and do it, and one team that really couldn't.
Now, is it fair to say that in that game, Staley lost DeAndre Carter when they were already down receivers, Jamari Sawyer, the left tackle, so in comes Sorrell, and Michael Davis, the best corner when he doesn't have JC Jackson already. That is being glossed over a bit at the minute, and correct me if I'm wrong, it didn't seem that the Jags lost anyone during the game. At least can't think of one off the top of my head. No. That affects, or at least contributed to, that second half comeback, I think.
Oh, of course, and you can't gloss over that fact because you're literally playing with second and third and fourth stringers anyway. So you're going in with one arm tied behind your back. But I think and if this is symptomatic, perhaps this loss was symptomatic of everything that happened this year, is that the reason our third quarters offensively anyway are so poor is, I believe, due to that breakdown in communication of not knowing how to adapt on the fly and not being creative enough and communicating with your players clearly. That's pure speculation. Obviously, we're not in the locker room and things like that. To circle back to Trevor Lawrence as a good quarterback, yes, I think he is. I actually think he's going to be pretty handy, and he's got one of the best coaches in the league with him. I think last year was an aberration with Urban Meyer. So, unfortunately, I think he's going to be okay. And I've got egg on my face for paying out the Jaguars at the start of the year. So, well done, Jack. Good job.
It doesn't make any of us happy to hear it. Just building on what you were saying about the adjustments, we talked about this a lot this season. We talked about, do our coaches have instincts, the right instincts? And let me go with three that really bothered me in this game. The one everyone's talked about, jet sweep to Michael Bandy on a 3rd and 1. I know Herbert checked into it, but that play shouldn't be in the book. I'll let you guys...
It should not be.
Oh, I'm going to jump right at that. I watched that sickeningly a lot of times last night, and I think Bandy actually got the motion timing wrong and was late on it and ran into it. He looked like he was trying to get out of the way, and the handoff was actually for Kelly, I think, who was the back at the time. So I don't think that jet sweep is maybe in the book, and I can't understand why they'd use Bandy as it, but it didn't look like he was expecting the ball. He looked like he was trying to get out of the way and was like, shit, I'm late. Okay. I don't think if you watch it again...
I have it, I would have to have another look.
He doesn't look like he's trying to receive the ball. doesn't put his hands up to take it. So I think he just up the timing. But yeah.
So that was brutal.
Why aren't you? But on that, why aren't you sneaking your 6'6" quarterback?
Right. I'm sure. I mean, I think that was the play call. The play call was sneak, and Herbert's gone kill.
Right.
And that's the kill play. That's the second play built in it, but it shouldn't be doing
How is that a checkout play when you've got your 5th or 6th wide receiver there? I just that boggles my mind. That absolutely blows my mind.
Yeah.
That absolutely blows my mind. Anyway,
so,
sorry, Alister.
So that's the no. I'll be quick. That's the main talked about one. 2 sneaky ones that also shit me off. Third quarter, 12 minutes remaining. We're up 27-7, and we decided to punt instead of attempt a 55-yard field goal with Dicker. Mm-hmm. We obviously couldn't trust that he made the distance, so that tells me is he the long-term answer? Because 55 yards, a lot of kickers can do that now. Why is that's important? The margin in the game is 20 points there. A field goal's really fucking handy. 23 points makes it a 3+ score game, and we decided to punt. You've got to attempt the 55-yard field goal there to go up by more than 3 scores. And then the one that pissed me off the most, from 3 from Jags 22. The score is 30-20, Chargers in front, 8 minutes left in the game. You've got to go for that 4th down rather than send Dicker out from 40 yards. All that does, if he converts it, is make the margin in the game 13 points instead of 10 points. Still a 2-score game. If you convert that 1st down and score a touchdown, ball game. What has happened to the Brandon Staley we knew from last year, the guy who trusted and used data? He has lost his marbles, and it's either specific to that incident or he's philosophically confused. Which do you think it is, Jack?
I don't think he's philosophically confused at all. I think the firing of Joe Lombardi shows that he had complete no confidence in the play call. And if you take the first thing that pissed you off, which was the bandy fuck up, if I've got an offensive coordinator and that the checkout is a jet sweep, I'm going, oh my God, what the hell is going on here? So I don't think it's a lack of confidence per se. I don't think it's a bit of being confused philosophically. I think it's a no confidence vote in what Lombardi was doing on his side of the ball, and that's why I think Joe Lombardi's seen the door.
Yeah, I think it was don't disturb the apple cart heading into the playoffs, but I think it was probably coming, irrespective of where the season ended. If it fell short, I don't think you can. I don't know. Can you fire an offensive coordinator if you go all the way? I think it was coming, but just first play of the second half after a pretty rubbish feel at the end of the first half is a handoff in the shotgun 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Eckler gets tackled immediately. You're going, what are you doing?
How bad was the feeling when that's the first play of the second half? I think every Chargers fan watched that and just thought, oh shit, this is now a game after that being the first play of the second half.
Yeah, and then it continued. The next sort of 1st and 10, the run plays a loss of 2 up the middle, and it just wasn't working. And it's really disappointing that as the offense, we couldn't even try to generate a run game to extend the pass game.
And when we did, Andy, this was inexplicable. We ran the ball 8 times to the right and 14 times to the left. Even though you've got Foster, Sorrell in the game. Yeah. Plus, Eckler's touchdown on the first drive is this perfect toss play to the right behind Zion and Pipkins and McKitty. How have we gone from that to only doing it 7 more times in the game?
Unbelievable.
Ridiculous how much I was watching them run behind Foster Sorrell. It just blew my mind. The guy looked like he was just like, not going to play for this team next year. He was out there just like run blocking, just like have a kid having an absolute ball, kicking leaves around a park. It was, get him off the damn field. Just glue Sully's leg back together.
In the defense of Lombardi, there is that Herbert checking out of plays and actually saying, no, I need the ball. I mean, the counter argument to that is, the ball's not. We're not getting anything on the ground, so we could be saying, or I guess the other side is, well, put the ball in the hands of your best player, which is Justin Herbert. But stick rout's not going anywhere. Speaking of best players, I think we probably need to dissect the Joey Bosa incidents.
Just about to bring that up, man.
Yeah, because
those
those were critical, and you don't necessarily want to put the loss on one mistake of one player at one time, but you look at Joey Bosa, he's a leader of the team, he's a captain of the defense, he's an experienced player. We look to him to not only generate pass rush but set the edge. You know, he's one of our premier guys, and to have him flip his lid like he did. What's going on there, Al? What's your opinion of the incidents?
He's blown one of the most important moments of his career. I think his whole season and what he's had to go through has contributed to how he's acted in that moment. He started the season like a house on fire, then suffers an injury in week 3, has to go through core surgery, that entire rehabilitation process. Probably isn't feeling 100%. And then he's finally made a play, or he's feeling good, and then he looks at this ref, who he feels, you've just cost me everything, do your job properly, and then the ref goads him by chasing him off the field, and he's just completely snapped. Now you need to be better.
See by the way he was walking, he was white hot, just psycho.
Oh, and I bet you two both wanted to stand up and clobber the referee over the head yourselves in that moment.
Oh, when I saw him chase him down, absolutely. That was horseshit.
That's despicable refereeing. Just absolutely despicable, in my opinion. But
looked like he enjoyed it too. He was having a bit of a smile as he threw his flag up in the air. But does that abnegate Bosa from the responsibility of being a leader? It doesn't. Jack, do you think Brandon Staley's a pushover? Do you think this is a reflection of Staley's managerial style that a player would be comfortable blowing up in that moment?
Yeah, good question. I think when you empower players and you have a players first mentality, and Staley today in his press conference talked about relationships. To let people flourish, these moments are going to happen. It's just unfortunate that it happens in a critical and crucial moment. Now, a lot of people on Twitter and on social media have said that Joey Bosa disrespected Brandon Staley because he threw his helmet in the second incident. He threw his helmet on the ground. Brandon Staley actually went and picked it up and actually gave it back to him. And a lot of people have said, he's told Brandon Staley to fuck off there, and he slammed it back on the ground. Joey Bosa's press conference, or when he was speaking to the media, completely said, no, that's completely on me. He was trying to help me there. So, and I'm not trying to draw comparisons to when you're being a teacher, but that is very much a moment where sometimes you just have to let someone blow off steam. It's going to be detrimental to them. It's probably going to be detrimental to you, but these moments just happen, and you have to, you can't jump on Joey Bosa. And I really hope that he's not listening too much to the media. That's Joey, and that Brandon and the organisation can kind of patch that over, because he's going to be reflecting on that for, as you said, Alister, for the rest of his career. But really good point.
That's a good question. And you've got to deal with it, because it's not only him. And this is what shits me off. We can have a go at the coaches for screwing up. I thought the coaches screwed up in so many ways. Just another way, McKitty had 28 snaps and Parham had 25. What's with that? So the coaches have shit the bed, to continue your kind of bed analogy from the game summary at the start, Andy. But also the players cannot escape this without taking responsibility. The coaches put you in a position to succeed generally with how they train you throughout the year, prepare you for big moments, call some of the right plays. At a certain point, the players need to take ownership, and we brought in all of these veterans with playoff experience: Mac, Callahan, Kyle Van Noy, Gerald Everett, who actually played really well. SJD. If just one of those guys, Bosa, Keenan, make a play, just do something to bail out your young head coach, who's going to completely
drop the interception.
He was that close, wasn't he? Almost made an unbelievable play.
That would have been absolutely,
There are all of those little moments, and you can dissect it as you do when you actually lose the game. There were any number of chances to win this. The Jags had just the perfect sequence of events, from good coaching to the Chargers kicking own goals, to Chargers players screwing up, to the referees helping them, to having no injuries. Yeah. Wow. Everything went right for them.
It was very noticeable when Michael Davis went out of the game. Jasir Taylor's got promise, but he's been exposed quite significantly the last couple of weeks. whiffed massively on Marvin Jones Jr. And was just outdone. You mentioned getting the coaches getting players ready for the big stage. Do you think there's an issue with Herbert on the big stage? Do you think
Good question.
he struggled a bit? Because you're looking at a 59.1% completion. His average depth of target, 6.4 yards. He had 4 batted passes for a 6'6" guy. Now, don't get me wrong, he had that beautiful sidearm completion. Yeah. That was sexy. But a lot of throws that were just really off, like that, the throw that just sailed over Keenan Allen in the end zone. He also had Donald Parham open on the opposite side of the goalposts.
Yep.
That just sailed it and just behind a couple of guys. And do you think there's any issue there?
It's his first ever playoff game, so he's going through something for the first time, just like Brandon Staley was.
So is Trevor Lawrence.
So is Trevor Lawrence. Very good retort.
Also threw 4 picks in the first half and then came back to do what he did.
Getting some more help from his offensive play caller, I might suggest. But the thing with Herbert, and you pointed out, his 2 lowest completion percentages for the entire year both came against the Jags. Had a look at his stats. So his 2 worst games from that perspective, week 3 and then on the weekend. So there's just something about the Jags DC that really knew what to do to stop our completions. They were ready for us both times. And like to your point, the batted passes at the line, he actually finishes with the most in the NFL.
Yeah.
With 23. Now, he's 6'6". So it makes you think, what the hell's going on? Well, I think the answer is Lombardi, because if your average depth of target is low,
Correct.
You're more likely to get battered.
Yep.
Whereas if you're pushing the ball down the field or hitting the middle of the field, it's less likely.
Yeah.
So, look, there's some of the reasons why it's not all on
that's fair
Herbert.
to be relative, yeah.
But he had a chance, didn't he? If he hits Keenan in the end zone there, I know some people will say, the Jags still would come back. Yeah.
Keenan was at the goal line, hits...
would have been 31 points, the margin in the game, had he connected with
so
Keenan
many
there.
moments where it just was game over. We can't not talk about our special teams hero, Dicker the kicker, missing that field goal. But that happens. Special teams also, just all 3 phases were just highly disappointing in the second half. Jamal Agnew was running amok on his, as normal, kick coverage was just not there.
Can I just get meta on Dicker for a second, Andy, before I forget? So Dicker's kicking basically for the first time in the playoffs. I don't mind the idea of sending him out from 55, because from 55 you're not that nervous and he can have a swing through of a nice kick to try and put this game out of reach. Instead, you sent him out from 40 when he hasn't kicked all game and it's in the 4th quarter. And that's when you're in your own head, because you go, I'm from 40, I've got to kick this, I haven't missed all year from 40, we're up by 10. He misses it, but there's a little bit of that. I know you trust your kicker to make the kicks. I don't mind sending a kicker out from 55 just to go, you know what, Dicker, I trust you, man. Go and make this a 3-score game. We're already up by 20 points. Go out there and smash it from 55.
Seeing it live, I thought the snap was slightly off. Now, I haven't gone and rewatched it. It looked either too quick or it came up on the placeholder really quickly, or it was just off to the placeholder's right. It just didn't look right when it occurred. I think Dicker's...
just on that, you mentioned it, and you mentioned that a couple of days ago. It looked fine.
Did it? Was all right?
Yeah, because I rewound and watched it again just to make sure there wasn't any boogeyman.
Good operation.
Good operation. It was a good operation, and it just moved left late. And
he only just missed it too, and the Jags only just kicked theirs at the end.
Yeah,
but it was defensive offside by Asante, so they would have had it back.
Good point.
5 yards closer as well.
That's why you're the host.
Yeah, well, you're the stats guy, so lift your game. Jack, I'm going to jump over to you just before we get into coaching. I'm going to launch ahead a little bit to what we'll be doing in a few months' time, getting ready for the draft. Considering the injury issues that we've had and the reliance on depth in our run defense, what level of importance do you put on drafting a run stuffer, DT, in the draft this year?
There's a lot of other factors that would go into a choice there, depending on what we do in free agency and who we retain. You know, if we retain guys like Morgan
Okay,
Fox,
consider our cap situation as it is, where free agency is going to be pretty
Okay,
thin.
so assume that the starting D tackles next year are Austin Johnson, SJD, Obonia, and Fahoko.
Yeah.
And Obonia.
I think with that four, with Fahoko's form, even though he's not being graded particularly high by PFF, I think he's doing a fantastic job. Austin Johnson was playing very well in the run game before he got injured. SJD is an interesting one. I still don't think he's heavy enough or he's big enough to play that proper nose tackle. And Obonia, who knows with the ruptured? Did he do his patella? Is that right? Obonia. So I'd like to see a big man. I'm talking bigger than Obonia as well. Anywhere between rounds 2 and 5. I think we need a. No, listen, don't misquote me here. I'm not saying we need Aaron Donald. I'm not saying
Siaki Ika.
It would be nice, but we need a guy who's 350, 360, who's 6'4", and that does probably a better job than Fahoko does. So yeah, I'm saying anywhere between 2 and 5. I don't think we take one in the first round, and it'll be interesting to see what we do with edge as well with our outside linebackers, because I don't know if Chris Rumph is it somehow, and I'm not sure if KVN's going to stay around. And with Bosa being a year older, with Mac being a year older, that defensive line, which we thought is going to be a strength this year, now all of a sudden
Morgan Fox has been a massive.
Huge.
Massive guy on our defensive line.
He's played himself out of our contract, I reckon. He's had 6.5 sacks or whatever it is. We might not be able to afford him now.
Yeah.
Unless this is why you keep Brandon Staley. This is why you keep Brandon Staley, because he's one of Staley's guys. He goes, you know what? No, I'm going to stay here. So time will tell with the restructures of what kind of culture that Brandon Staley has generated. He came out today and said, all the guys are in. We're all in. We're going to try and stay here. We're going to do this. Time will tell.
What do you think about it, Jack? Because I'm interested in your view, and then I've got one for you, Andy. But you've seen this in Essendon with the Asada stuff. Mm-hmm. Do you think a loss like this destroys the culture Staley's built? We've seen, I'll let you just answer it.
My first reaction, it was going to be, your mind goes to the Atlanta Super Bowl loss, because it's of that gravity of a kind of soul-destroying defeat. Yes, it's not a Super Bowl, but it was a lot of people's first time in the playoffs. It was our first time in the playoffs after a while. We're not Atlanta. We don't have an aging quarterback. I think Brandon Staley has the capacity and capability to get through this with his players. We have emotional players in Joey Bosa, Derwin James, SJD. Justin Herbert, not so much. He's quite removed as a leader, but he's also very stoic and stalwart. So I think there are the personalities in the locker room to get through it. I think firing Brandon Staley would have been a mistake. I'm going to put that out there now, because that's the figurehead. You go through shit. First year, second year, you get battle hardened. Third years, this is it now, guys. So there's going to be no excuses next year. I think that's the corner that Staley and the team have now backed themselves in. At the end of next year, we see if it's time to blow it all up and rebuild, it's time to blow it up and rebuild, because then you've got Justin Herbert's contract and you've got all that kind of stuff. So I think there's an ability to do this, judging by the way the players have spoken and responded on social media too. I don't think it's window dressing. I don't think it's like a Lynn situation where everyone said, he's a great guy, I would love to have him around, and Anthony Lynn was fired within days. So,
yeah. Brandon's got a good relationship with the Spanish, if you didn't know.
He very
daily and
does.
weekly.
He does.
Catches up daily and weekly.
Yeah, he's almost just cupping and fondling them with some of his remarks. It's a bit, right. He's seen her work for Tom Telesco, and he's thinking, actually, my job's on the line here. I better be careful about what I say. Andy, I got one for you, mate, and it's just a follow-up on Staley. So he's the coach now, and he has said that he's going to remain the defensive play caller next year. What do you think about that?
What do I think about it? I think that I'd rather him not go that way. I see why he kind of does, because he has he has pride in everything that he's worked for and built, and it's his baby. And he talks a lot about the offense being his side of the ball because he was a QB, but he will not let go of the defense. And I wouldn't have minded him to hire or replace Ronaldo Hill with someone older, more experienced, who can just worry about the defensive game management and play calling, and he can just focus on rather the game management and the team as a whole. Manage the clock, your timeouts and stuff without having to do two things. It's field he's played a lot in his first 2 years. So going into this, there's a lot of pressure on, as you said, Jack. They really have. It's the fool me once, fool me twice kind of thing. Now we're going into year 3, and there's some of the vitriol, I guess, is fair out in the thing. The way that out in Twitter, it's the way that it's coming across is pretty nasty and really violent, and I put that down to the emotion of the first 72 hours after a loss like that. But it's understandable that people are saying, we blew last year by losing to the Raiders, and we blew this year by mismanaging the second half, or just not showing up in the second half at all. It's disappointing and it hurts, but I still have faith that he can reshuffle this coaching staff the way he needs to. I was surprised to see Shane Day fired. I thought that the relationship he had with Herbert was really good, but he also spoke in his presser about the importance of leadership. So I don't know, and alignment. So maybe Shane Day, even though he hasn't really had too much to do with Joe Lombardi in the past, having come from San Fran, I don't know. That was a bit of a surprise.
On that, I think if you're going to invite an OC to come in, you need to give the OC a choice of the quarterback coach. I think you generally would see some kind of synchronicity there, rather than say, in you come and your QB coach is going to be this guy and your running back coach is going to be that guy.
Exactly.
I think generally whoever comes in will get a bit of say over his staff. That might have been the reason. I'm just speculating.
Yeah, maybe.
I also think, I noted it today, I think that's why Michael Wilhoit has also been shown the door. As I sort of pointed out, that special teams is made up of DBs and linebackers. And if we talk about Ryan Ficken's not going anywhere because he's taken that playing group to 6th in the NFL. So, stick with him, and, Ryan Ficken maybe gets a guy in that linebackers coach. Which is interesting. I mean, Alister, I just wanted to throw... You asked Andy a question there. I just wanted to throw one back at you.
Sure.
Do you think that Brandon Staley calling the defence limits his capacity to grow as a head coach? And let me preface this before you answer by saying we've seen the defence change markedly to a number 1 defence in 6 weeks. We know that Brandon Staley is a great defensive coordinator. Can you note any bits of evidence, or have you seen anything that he's becoming a better head coach? Because what you said before, chances are that he's not, because he's actually gone the other way. He's philosophically confused. What say you?
It's such a good question. I don't know the answer. Like, part of me wants to let him burn like a flame and go out the way he wants to go out. This is his one chance of being a head coach. He wants to call the defense. He probably lets Lombardi have quite a bit of say on what happens with the offense. A lot of great head coaches, including some of the all-time greats, call the play on their side of the ball. And did it from the get-go, I'm pretty sure. Don't 100% know, but guys like Belichick and others like Sean Payton, pretty sure from day one, they took their lumps but knew what I'm best at doing here is this, and I'm going to do it. The problem is, Staley hasn't actually shown he's great at doing that. He's not like a Sulla or Shanahan where he comes in and then the team suddenly transforms from being bad to being a top 5, whatever. I mean, the defense just on some numbers are still in the 20s in both points and yards, even though we saw improvement at the end of the year.
Yeah, it's a steep mountain to climb.
I think you're right that if he did not have defensive play calling duties, he would have more time to dedicate to being a better all-around head coach. I think one would have to, right? You just would have more time. You don't need to come up with a defensive game plan. You don't need to be thinking about calling plays. It's got to be bloody hard. But I want to empower him to make the decision for himself and do it his way, maybe in his final year.
I mean, the amount of personnel groupings that you have to change and looking at what the opposition are throwing out there in their personnel and then matching it, then making the play call. I mean, that's full on. That does not stop, right? It just does not stop. So you get this tunnel vision. I don't know. You get this tunnel vision of one half of the game, and when the offense is out there, you kind of go, I'm taking a break here, but all of a sudden there's a really critical 4th and 2, and you go, oh shit, actually, okay, I actually need to. And I'm not saying that Staley can't do that, but if you're a coach that just is sitting back and has empowered, I don't know how much freedom, Ronaldo Hill has there. Is he just is he just relaying messages and looking after the defensive players? I'm not sure, but yeah, it feels like Staley tried to compensate for that lack of perhaps control on the offensive side of the ball last year by being uber aggressive. That was my control. That's how I'm going to do it. We're just going to go for it. I'm not even going to think about it. I'm not even going to fathom it because I'm so busy being a first-year head coach and also a defensive coordinator here. Yeah. Now he's gone, I think I've got the defense all right. Okay, I'm going to think about offense a little bit more. What are we doing? But then the defense started to really struggle. So it's a confluence of factors, and I think it's going to be fascinating in year 3. That's all I can say.
And if you look at the coaches who did relinquish the play calling duties, you're looking at guys like Mike Tomlin, you're looking at guys like John Harbaugh, you're looking at Ron Rivera a little bit later on in his career. And a lot of those guys are successful head coaches. You look at them on the sideline, they're not doing anything. They're just talking in their headset. But a lot of them are great coaches. Maybe there's something to it, Jack. What do you think, Andy?
Look, I see a lot of merit in Jack's suggestion that he could develop a lot more as a head coach. And I just feel like it's been a really quick rise. Like, he was in the NFL for a couple of years. Yeah. In Chicago as a backers coach, and then 1 year as defensive coordinator in LA at the Rams, and then he's had now 2 years as a head coach, and it's just like, okay, can coach a position group, they're successful, got good talent, Mac, etc. at Chicago, and then I go to the Rams and we win the Super Bowl, got the number 1 defense, and then we got the number 1 defense next year on the Super Bowl, and then comes over to LA and he's got to do it all. He's got to manage the whole team and call the plays, and it's a big step. It's a big jump for him to grow, and I'm sure he's capable of doing it. But I understand the doubt around it. I'd like to I think he'd see it as a step back for him if he was to relinquish play calling duties. But I just don't think that he'll get a second chance with this team if it doesn't go well.
Can I throw another question back at you as well, Andy?
Yeah.
We haven't talked about Derwin James just yet, and there's a lot of heat on Twitter from some corners of the Twitterverse saying that the defense is actually better off without Derwin James. Now, listen, this is what I want to explore a little bit. Is it a fallacy? I guess I sort of proposed it to us in our group chat that he's a very different weapon from an Aaron Donald and a Jalen Ramsey. You can fire and forget with Jalen Ramsey, and you can fire and forget with Aaron Donald because they just do their things. Jalen Ramsey's a shutdown corner. Whatever side he's on, whatever he's doing is not going to change the coverage for the players around him. Aaron Donald, he just wreaks havoc wherever he goes. Derwin James, being a strong safety, mixing cover 2, cover 1, jumping down on those routes, leaving Gilman exposed. This Swiss Army knife, Brandon Staley kept saying, we're going to utilise this guy as a Swiss Army knife. He's going to be the do-it-all. Where do you think, where are you at? What's your first, reaction when I put it to you like that?
Not really surprised because when you put it to me in the way that we're not really sure whether or not it works. Well, I'm pretty sure on the last week's show I asked you what is actually the use in having this Swiss Army knife guy who borderline has free reign on what he sees. He can just sort of go for.
And makes All-Pro in so doing.
Yeah. Fair enough. But at times, especially later in the year, while the defense started to really hum, when he returned, there were moments, week 18, when he went to go on Cortland Sutton, Wilson hit Jerry Jeudy, and Gilman was like, dude, are you covering the guy, or I'm here in support? And there was just like, Gilman didn't know what was going on. I feel like there is a little bit of uncertainty, or just it's maybe there's getting used to having a guy out here who's just going to make a play on the ball, and I've just got to commit to my route. And maybe it's so what I'm looking for, like a lack of experience from Gilman to not just like worry about what his job is. So who knows? I was not surprised by remarks about the defense being better without him, but I still think it's silly, and he's not on my team.
What do you think, Alister?
I think it's hard based just off the sample, but I think there's some sense to what Andy has said. Because, I mean, originally the record with and without Derwin was extraordinary in terms of with him, we won a lot more games, and without him, we suddenly lost all these games. And then the last few weeks, suddenly you have the opposite being the case. Although they looked pretty damn good in the first half with him out there, didn't they? So, but I don't know. Maybe there is something to there being. I feel like there were definitely more explosive plays allowed with Derwin in the lineup. Whether it was earlier in the season when he was available, the only time we stopped letting up these explosive plays was kind of the period he was out injured, which is very interesting. I mean, we saw a huge one again against the Jags, right? We saw that big touchdown where something went wrong. Something for Staley to think about is their value. Sure. And the same thing has happened with some of these positionless players around the league. Your Isaiah Simmons, Kyle Hamilton for the Ravens. The Ravens has realised this guy's a big nickel. We're going to play him there.
That's right.
Instead of trying to play him all over the place, maybe just let Derwin be a fantastic strong safety.
And look at Jamal Adams. The guy's got one of the worst coverage grades in the league last couple of years. I mean, he's been injured, so you're better off just playing him at the line. You know, you go back to the Legion of Boom where you had Earl Thomas on the back end, possibly one of the greatest free safeties of a generation. And then in that you've got Cam Chancellor. And was he a middle linebacker or was he a strong safety? Again, he's that go-between. What do you call it? He's the bandit. That's that bandit type player. And then you've got Sherman, who was the lockdown corner. So it's an interesting kind of, question to ask and to see how he's going to be utilised next year. Because I think the green dot got taken off him too. It was given to Tranquil, which is an interesting one. All pro, understand, incredible player. And I think I'd rather have him on my team than not. As a leader, but just an interesting one. That was another reaction from the Twitterverse.
Yeah, we've talked a few coaches so far. Some that have gone. Thanks for your service, Joe Lombardi and Michael Wilhoit, and who's the other one I'm missing? Shane Day, as I mentioned. That's right. Thanks for your service and all that jazz. But it makes it exciting. We've got an offensive coordinator to look forward to hiring and chat about. And we've still got some other coaches, some that I think whose heads might still be on the chopping block. You said before, Jack, and we don't need to go on and on about this. Brandon Staley's safe. We're all comfortable with that.
I want to get on my soapbox about this. I've got something I want to say about this.
Okay, I'm glad I introduced this.
Yeah, because I'm quite passionate about it. I did a bit of research. I will post it in the comments. Here are just a few head coaches and their records after 2 full NFL seasons. Brandon Staley right now is 19 wins, 15 losses, and the playoff loss, his overall record is 55.9%. A few coaches who've had a much better record are guys like Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay. These are right at the top of the list, and this includes some Hall of Fame coaches, other Chargers coaches, and current coaches in the league. LaFleur, McVay, John Madden, Don Shula, Mike Tomlin, Nick Sirianni. They're all above 65%. Mike McCarthy, even Anthony Lynn after 2 years. They're all above 65%. Here are a lot of guys who had way lower records after 2 years. Tom Landry, the famous Cowboys Hall of Fame coach, 15%. Chuck Noll, 4 Super Bowls with the Steelers, 21%. Bill Walsh, 25%. Robert Saleh, Kyle Shanahan, 31%. Bill Belichick, 40%. So what I can take from some of that data, Andy Reid also had less, is if you wanted to fire Brandon Staley at this point with a winning record in 2 seasons, it would be, I think, historically unprecedented. I haven't completely looked through to see has anyone been fired with a 55% win-loss record. But if you would have made the decision to fire him, I'm going to tell you that you are an arrogant GM and you are a bad GM. It is process-wise the same thing as trading up in the draft because you think you know better than everyone else and picking one player when you could have had two. What the NFL records tell you is after 2 seasons, there is such a variety of outcomes. You could still either be a Hall of Fame coach, you could be Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick and these guys with shit records, or you could be someone with a great record. To fire someone with an above 50% record at this stage after 2 years reeks of arrogance, irrationality, and letting your emotions get the better of you. Because you know what? You might be right. Maybe he won't be a good coach. Maybe he'll be Mike McCoy or Lynn, who also had above 50% records after 2 years. But I'd tell you that those guys didn't deserve to get fired after 2 years either. You have to have the humility to let it play out for at least another season and see what happens. That's my perspective on Staley. Even if you don't like some of the things you've seen, you've got to give coaches a third year unless they've been so bad that they just clearly cannot hack it, and that is not Brandon Staley.
Did
you
Marty
mean the
deserve
pun
to
there?
get fired?
With Hackett?
I didn't, but I wish I did.
That was good. Take credit for it.
Did Marty deserve to get fired after going 14-2?
I'm sure a lot of people have
man.
opinions on that. It is a weird organisation. But just those first 2 years, it's so hard.
Yeah.
It's just so hard to be an NFL head coach. And another clear example when you're being illogical is when you start using absolute terms for everything you say. He always screws up. He doesn't do anything right. He is so arrogant. When
He's
you start
a liar.
hearing that-
He lied
when
to
you-
us.
What you're doing is you're getting too upset about what just happened, which was tragic. I was as upset as anyone. I barely slept on the plane on the way home, right? But you're forgetting that the team was very injured this year. He kept this group together, let them win 4 games in a row at the end of the year when everyone thought we weren't making playoffs. Remember just back then? We thought Titans weren't going to happen. We thought all these things weren't going to happen, and they did. So just, he's got a lot to prove, but he definitely deserved to keep his job.
Dun, 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 dun. There we go.
Where,
Well done.
Where,
Well
where
said.
do we sit on Tom Telesco, guys?
Interesting
Luckily,
one.
I mean, you'd have to say if anything was to happen to Brandon Staley, then Tom Telesco would be out the door. 4 failed coaches, but I don't think anything's going to happen. Personally, we've obviously had Joe Lombardi out the door. We can get into some potential replacements shortly. I'll just run through another couple of guys for myself before I throw over to you. I've got questions surrounding the offensive line and the run game. Now, look, injuries are one thing on the offensive line, and that's fair, but there's got to be a combination of Brendan Nugent and Derek Foster organising that run game, and no bueno. Hopefully something handy comes in, but we're just thrashing it with non-power backs between the tackles relentlessly is just shocking. And look, a lot of that could come down to Lombardi, but I think there's questions to be asked of those two. Ryan Ficken, we mentioned before, he's the first guy I'd bring back, did awesome things with special teams. Are there any coaches in particular that you guys aren't sure on, or before we get really into the OC stuff, any other guys? Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer this. I'll also want to just talk about the relationship between Joe Lombardi and Brandon Staley before we do that as well, and then get into some offensive coordinators. But how I look at it is that Brandon Staley was talking about coherency and consistency, and the way I now see it is that with Joe Lombardi going, you get a new OC, which means that I think that OC has the chance to pick his offensive line, because if we're going with a Shanahan tree, there's going to need a guy that's aware of knowing how to do that zone blocking scheme. You're probably going to get a new running backs coach in there as well, who's familiar with that, who can empower Eckler in the back. So already Derek Foster and Brendan Nugent, they will fall under the purview of the new OC. And obviously Shane Day's always has left as well. So I think that's where you're seeing. And then you've got, I think, I've sort of put yellows and reds and greens on the coaches that I think are are sort of worried, and Nugent, Foster, Shane Day were all red for me. Chris Beattie, who's our wide receivers coach, I'm almost going to say he could be safe because there's been enough development from Palmer, Guyton to say that he's actually doing okay.
Yeah, good call, Jack.
Yeah, and then you've also got Kevin Koger as the tight end, and I put him as a bit of an orange because tight ends are really important if we're going with a Shanahan style.
Yeah.
But tight ends especially are also really important in the special teams, so especially those third and fourth string development tight ends. So, you want a tight ends coach to work with Ficken and also with the new OC. But there's been enough development in the tight ends, bar McKitty. Parham's been all right. Everett's been a revelation this year. So I think he's going to be okay. Then where does Michael Wilhoit? He's gone because that that linebackers coach is going to have to work really closely with Ficken and also Hill. But then there's Giff Smith, and I've put red on Giff Smith too. Jay Rogers, I think he's doing a good enough job. And then you've got Derek Ansley. I've put both those guys green as well. Anything there, Alister?
Well, just on that, Giff Smith and Jay Rogers swapped roles. Do you think that's had a positive or a negative impact on how the defensive line's played? Not much. We've brought in a lot of power, star power, but maybe and lost Bosa to injury for a lot of the year. Can you just kind of say... don't know at the moment?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Giff Smith is, is obviously his relationship with Joey Bosa means that he sort of moved out there, I'd say, and Mac. And, even though we've said that Rumpf hasn't been great, I mean, he still showed enough. But I think everyone on the defensive side of the ball,
He's just got to grow up.
I feel like everyone on the defensive side of the ball is kind of a green because Staley's not changed.
Yeah.
What about Ronaldo Hill? That's a big one. What would you do with Ronaldo Hill? I know Staley's now said he's going to play call, so
I've put him as green too. He's a DB. He's a DB specialist. So,
and he played in the NFL. He's the only guy on the. Now that Will Hoyt's gone, I think he might be the only coach who played.
Yeah. So, did you have anything else to add to that, Alister, at all?
I agreed with everything you said. I think Koger will be interesting. I think he probably goes when the new OC comes in, but I hear what you're saying about the alignment with Ficken. Brendan Nugent's gone. I thought the O-line wasn't as good this year. Our running game was awful. So he's going to go.
Yeah.
And I think what I wanted to touch on about, just really quickly, and we spoke about this today, is that the Joe Lombardi and Brandon Staley situation, Joe Lombardi has known Brandon Staley since he was 22 years old. We spoke on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago, how hard is it to have a conversation with your mentor? It's easy to have a conversation when the mentor is here and you're there. So for listeners, the mentor's above you and you're below. When you supersede that mentor and that mentor now needs to start taking orders from you and directions from you, that's a very uncomfortable place to be. Now, you alluded to it, Alister. Perhaps Staley just gave Lombardi all the time and purview in the world and all the freedom because there was that weird relationship. Staley's a relationship guy. He doesn't want to jeopardize the guy that got him there. And so maybe it was just a rip the Band-Aid off. Okay, you got to disappear. And I think that might have been holding back Brandon Staley's development.
It's not a good dynamic, is it? Like imagine
No.
it would be difficult to have frank conversations with that person.
But 2 years ago, perfect, because he's a brand new head coach and he needs that mentor there. It's that crutch almost. But you could also say that perhaps Brandon Staley's now outgrown Joe, which means Joe quietly goes on his way and Staley gets that new offensive coordinator in. And I think that's where we're going to go now, right, Andy?
I think you're right. There's been a few names tossed around. Probably the most attractive to me and probably the hottest candidate, I think, on the market at the moment. A bit of a shock that he got released by the Jets is Mike LaFleur of the Shanahan system. I like the idea of that. I think it makes it quite easy on the quarterback. And with an elite quarterback, it's really quite awesome to watch them succeed. Jack, is there any other names that you're across for the position or favourites of yours?
Yeah, weird one. Another young guy, a Princeton guy. He's from the 49ers, and that's Bobby Slowick, and he's their offensive passing game coordinator. Again, part of the Shanahan tree. He's a quarterback-focused coach. He's not a run-focused coach. So perhaps you've got there not only your passing game coordinator, but you've got an OC who's very familiar with what it is like to deal with quarterbacks who are not great in the system and perhaps have a limit to their talent of what they can do. And getting him and his hands with Justin Herbert in that scheme, boy, oh boy. Very young though, 35 years old, even though he does have a decent resume. But he was one that popped up maybe a little bit out of left field. Alister, any from you?
3 that would be Spanos types, those who've had previous associations with the organisation. The most obvious who falls into this bucket, who I'd be happy enough with, is Frank Reich. Been with the organisation in the past. He gives Staley what I think he needs is one guy in the building who's been a head coach or who has a lot of experience. I would like to see that relationship. My only reservation about Frank Reich is I watched a lot of the Colts, especially when Rivers was there, and that some of those same issues came a cropper. Forgetting to run the ball at certain times, or then when he should run the ball, so when he should pass, he's running the ball, and he'd often be apologising to Colts fans about how he managed the game. That was a thing that happened quite a bit in Indianapolis. 2 other guys with charges linked, Scott Turner, Norv Turner's son, who was fired as OC from Washington. That could be a really easy one to do, right? There's still that kind of relationship there, familiarity with the organisation. And then
is there
the other
a relationship there after the coach gets fired? Like, would Frank happily walk back in the building? Would Scott Turner turn around and go, hey, you fired my dad, I'll work for you?
Yeah, that's the je ne sais quoi. I don't know, but you're right. It could either be bad blood.
You're just too nice sometimes.
Oh, I'll take it. And then, the one that would be a bit of a weird one would be, hey, you know what? Pep Hamilton just got fired from the Texans, and let's get him back in the building after doing stuff with Herbert. The only other one I want to mention that's random and out there, and I haven't heard as many talk about it, is Todd Monken, who is the OC for the Georgia Bulldogs, and has had experience in the NFL. He was a Browns OC for a year. He was a Bucks OC for a year. And he's been with that Georgia offense for 3 years now. They've won championships. He's 56 years old. And it's pretty clear that Staley's got a relationship with Kirby Smart and spends a lot of time thinking about Georgia. So he's one of the hot names in college football. Older head, comes in and brings that veteran experience. Just a few.
Yeah. Couple of other names from me. Brian Johnson, he's currently the Eagles quarterback coach. He's young as well, 35. He's been working with Jalen Hurts. We've seen quite an awesome improvement in his game. And another one, Zach Robinson, the Rams passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach. Obviously working under McVay, so that West Coast as well. McVay touts him as some kind of genius, or he's amazing. So good raps on him. I think he's young as well.
Who was that, Andy?
For me. Zach Robinson.
Because I've got Thomas Brown from the Rams, because he's the assistant head coach. Another young guy. He could sort of come in if he's from that McVay tree. Because I think this hire, Staley said in his press conference today that experience is not necessary. So we're not looking for a guy that has been an offensive coordinator in the past necessarily. But you're kind of wanting someone to come in, and if Staley is still play calling, he doesn't probably have the time to put a young guy who's not super confident in play calling going, okay, this is what we've got to do. You've got to have a guy that knows what it's like to be a head coach, that knows the pressure and the time it takes to develop these things, and to have a bit of an ego. And when I think of ego, I immediately think of Sean McVay, right? You think of the guy that's hyper masculine, but also very emotionally aware. And so someone from that organisation who's been an assistant head coach and spent 2 years with this guy, might have sort of rubbed off on him a little bit. But Thomas Brown, another young guy, Thomas Brown, 36. I always think that anyone older that comes in, Brandon Staley's got to have a really interesting and positive working relationship with them. That's all I can say. Also, the issue, as you pointed out before, Alister, we don't have many ex-players. Is that an issue? Some people see as it is. And we have a whole young gun team of coaches? Possibly. That would be very out of character for the Spanoses. But that's about it from my side. Did you have anything else, Al?
Joe Brady is another name that gets mentioned quite a bit. He's again in that young hotshot thing who came in and burnt out in his first year with the Panthers, but now he's been working as the Buffalo Bills quarterback coach with Josh Allen. Maybe the second time around. I think he's early 30s. I don't have the data in front of me. But if you're trying to pair Brandon Staley with like an offensive wonderkind who everyone is the next big thing, he would fall into that type of a bucket.
And probably not too much dissimilarity between... He worked under Sean Payton, I think, in 2017 and 18, Joe Brady. So probably not too much different language and concepts in his offense to Joe's, potentially.
Well, that's a really good question, right? Do we want continuity with the same verbiage and the same basic, or do we want a brand new... Do we want a McShanahan system?
Just pick the best.
Yeah.
Herbert is smart enough. He really...
Exactly.
I'm not worried. Like Matt Castle was saying how difficult it is. I don't know what Matt Castle is what his aptitude is, but I feel like Herbert has a very high aptitude. And maybe it'll be 1 year where he's not in his best in year one, which is a bit of a problem because we kind of need to win the Super Bowl next year. But anyway, we do want the best long-term fit.
There's a lot of changes happening at the wrong time.
Yeah, we need the best long-term fit. If we're going to fire Lombardi, we must get this hire right.
Has to be.
Has to be right, and you could get conservative and say we want to pick a guy who's not going to be a head coach again because we want to keep him with Herbert, whereas you hire a hot young guy and if it works he'll be gone in a year's time, 2 years' time, but it's tough decisions to make. I'm glad I don't have to make it.
Yeah. Well, we sit in wait for what may yet occur, what we get aroused with via Twitter at the odd hours of the morning happening in the States. People getting fired and people getting hired. It's exciting times once again at Chargers Park. At least something positive to look forward to. Joe Lombardi's out the door. Our season may be done. But who will stay or who will go is the question burning all Chargers fans' brains. Guys, as we sort of wrap up today, the three of us deeply want to thank you all for your listenership throughout our first season here on TDU. We'll be rounding out the 22-23 season in a week or two's time, catching up with one of the boys, Kyle D. Don't miss us then. We'll miss all of you as we take a bit of a break. Some stress leave, much needed after the last game. Mental health time off over February. Then throughout March and April, we'll be back probably on a fortnightly kind of schedule, getting into free agency in the 2023 NFL draft. Don't forget to give the show a like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And if you're on Twitter, we'll be far more active on Twitter throughout the off-season when the shows aren't on. Keep in touch with our shorts releases, info about our shows, and of course, hashtag TDU Films. Follow us at TDU_Chargers. You can find the three of us individually there as well. Keep up with the latest. Cheers, legends. One last time, boys. FTR!
FTR.
See ya.
See you guys. Have a good... See ya.
Back pedals looking, firing, he's got Floyd turning, got it, zigzag, 10, 5, high step, touchdown, San Diego!
Woo! Good night! Good night to all!